coordinating this project, and we are working with a group of researchers in this atlas. Regarding myself, I started working on environmental conflicts in spring 2014 at ICTA in Barcelona. I spent some months there, and then in September I arrived in Rome, and I joined the research group of CDCA, and we started in October working on this project that is still ongoing. Someone is arriving. I will give you an introduction to the project now. Then we will go through objectives and instruments we have in this project. We will talk about the methodology we used in the case selection process and then in the participatory mapping process. Then we will talk about difficulties and solutions we met and we found during the process. And we will try to give you some outlooks about our research and work in the future, and at the end there will be place for debate, and so you will have time to ask questions, and we hope to have some space for stimulate new works, respective works. So the name of the atlas is the Italian Environmental Conflict Atlas, that basically is a database in the form of a georeferenced map representing initially around 100 cases of Italian socio-environmental conflicts. And these conflicts we are mapping date from the 60s to the 2014. Is an atlas in form of a participatory map, so we involved local committees from civil society in the description of each conflict. And once created this database with 100 cases, it will be created an online platform that will be a living and open source instrument in the hand of the committees. The work comes from the will to study, describe and recount environmental conflicts that have been developing in Italy, with the aim of scrutinizing causes that produce them, the mobilization that characterize them, and the consequence that they have on the perception of the environmental issues and on the development of studies and policies about common goods management and territories transformation. The Italian mapping project is conceived and implemented by CDCA, that is the Documentation Center on Environmental Conflicts, and I will tell you about the CDCA later. And so it comes from the work that CDCA started in 2007 of study of environmental conflicts at global level, and it's improved by the experience and work of the EJOL project and specifically the atlas. So there is a big synergy in the working methodology that we arrived to this participatory map. The EJOL project, I don't think we have to explain in this situation, you know, but the main idea is a collaborative project to bring science and society together to tackle ecological distribution conflicts and work towards confronting environmental injustice. So the project involved 23 organizations, and activist organization, environmental organization, and the CDCA is part of this group. And one of the core elements of the project is the atlas, that is a global inventory of more than 1,000 cases of environmental conflicts spread over the world. The CDCA worked within the EJOL project and helped in the creation of this database with the conflicts they studied since 2007 at global level. The Documentation Center on Environmental Conflicts it was founded in 2007 by ASUD, and the mission is to research and provide information about causes and consequences of socio-environmental conflicts that arise in opposition to specific projects. The initial work of the CDCA was concentrated on the study, collection, and documentation and also intervention in environmental conflicts in the southern hemisphere, specifically Latin America, Asia, and Africa, which have been, since 2007, documented and mapped. During the last years, CDCA then started focusing one part of its investigation and study on environmental conflicts in Italy. And this was facilitated by the big network of contacts and collaboration that CDCA and ASUD have on all the country. So what is important to say is that CDCA worked on and started mapping environmental conflicts in 2007, but with the EJOLT project and the EJATLAS structure, we managed to implement a better way and systems to systematize data and to gather information about each conflict. Objectives and instruments of all the working process. We have 4 objectives. The first one is to give visibility and diffusion to environmental conflicts in the society, in the academic community, with institutions. The second one is to inform about the present and past conflicts in Italy and about their peculiarities, and with aim to stimulate new discussion about what is happening at regional and national level around environmental conflicts. Then we want, with this project, we are trying and we are also managing to link up committees and facilitate the creation of networks of mobilization, knowledge, mutual education, and sharing of best practices. And finally, but very important, to involve local committees in the collection of information on the entire course of the project and in the systematization of data. And this is happening and will happen in 2 different phases. The actual phases, we are in the collection of the 100 cases, and they are involved, actively involved daily in the description of the case, and this is leading to an empowerment of the committees. And the second phase will be once the Atlas will be launched in spring 2015, probably, in the use and appropriation of the instrument Atlas by the committees. Regarding the instrument, we still don't have, but we will have soon, an online platform as the EJATLAS, but specifically on the Italian project, where the cases are described and mapped, and so identifiable geographically on an interactive form. This will help and will give the possibility to search for commodities or search for region, search for type of conflicts within this atlas. And this map serves as an instrument of visibility of each case and representation of the distribution of ecological conflict in Italy. This system will permit us to describe, analyze, compare, and interpret quantitative and qualitative data of the conflicts gathered and the information within the conflicts. The methodology we use I divided into phases: the case selection process, and the local committee's involvement. First of all, what was very important to us to start was to establish and also involve the committee in the understanding of what we intend for environmental conflict. And so, to characterize, there are two characteristics of an environmental conflict fundamental to identify it. The first one is the reduction, qualitative or quantitative, of available environmental resources caused by the imposition of a project that can be by a company, a multinational corporation, or governments. And the second one, and maybe most important, is the presence of a mobilization, so protest by local residents and or can be also larger opposition movements in the civil society against the project because of the impacts of the project in the territory. And this was very important because in Italy we have plenty of disaster, but that cannot be identified as environmental conflict because they don't have protests in the territories. The case selection process, I told you we have 100 cases. We are working on 100 cases, and the process was the characteristic and the factors that defined. At the end, please, okay. Can you write and then so there are different factors that help us to select the cases. The first one is the relevance of the conflict, then the existing national cataloging, historical cases present in the nation, the age categories, and the geographical distribution of conflicts in all the country. We will see now each category. The relevance of the conflict can be defined in terms of the severity of impacts on the environment, public health and society, or in terms of the relevance of the mobilization, including both the intensity and the outcome of the conflict on the territory or on the project. And these two determinants are not always necessarily linked. So there are cases, for example, in Sicily, the conflicts against the petrochemical complex of Gela. The petrochemical complex was built in the 60s, is a big complex, and since those time started to pollute severely the area around it. So the pollution is very, very high, even though there is not a high and a strong mobilization in the area. Another example can be the oil extraction in Basilicata. Basilicata is the region, the main region where there is oil, field oil in Italy, and is also one of the main field oil in Europe. Is the place where all the Italian but also international company arrive to extract oil, and is a place where the protests are not so high, even though there is, for example, an EJOS, environmental justice organization, working there and fighting there. The local population is not active on these issues. Now this year, that the new government launched a new decree to foster extraction of oil in the area, protests start to rise a little bit more, but still not as in other case. And on the opposite side, we have example, for example, of the Dalmolin case that is in Veneto, so in the northern area. The process against the construction of the military base, that a protest that has been continuing for years, is a big protest and well known in all the country, but impacts, of course, are not comparable to other areas. Then we use also, very important was the existing of national cataloging of environmental affected areas, and I refer in particular of the SIN areas and the SIR areas. These are sites of national interest or sites of regional interest, and are extensively contaminated areas classified in this way by the Italian state that urgently need remediation of soil, groundwater, surface water. They were defined and identified by different decrees, but the 2006 decrees identify in relation of the characteristic of the site, the pollution, the hazard pollution in the area, the importance of the impact on the surrounding environment in terms of health and ecology, and the injury to local population. This is why we decided to follow also this kind of cataloging. And another one is the sites of regional interest that basically are also contaminated area, but under the jurisdiction of the region. So local authorities has to develop the remediation of the area. Here you can have an idea of the scene in Italy. We have 57 scenes. In reality, some of them were undergraduated to SIR. For example, in Giuliano, where we were Sunday, the scene was changed to SIR. We have 180,000 hectares, and so around 3% of the whole territory. And all the Italian regions have at least one scene. The main region, the winner ones, are Campania and Sardinia. And some of the most known and important, for example, in Venezia, the Porto Marghera area, that is a big industrial area that we have in the map, or the Brescia-Caffaro, also in north, that is a place where chemical industry polluted the area, and so on. Porto Torres in Sardinia, Taranto, that maybe is quite known, and so on. And in the majority of these cases, in some of these cases, there are also protests and mobilization, and so we decide to put these conflicts within the map. Then we follow also the historical cases that are typical in Italy, and here, so there are cases that date back to the 60s, to the 70s, basically case of big disaster, but that also have some mobilization. And here some photos can show us, but this was the protest against the Valiant disaster in '63. After the disaster that killed 2,000 deaths caused by a landslide in a big dam that caused a tsunami in North Valley. Or, for example, the Seveso disaster in '76 that caused a high pollution in the atmosphere of all the area near Milano. Or, for example, the protest against the nuclear power plant in Monte di Castro, as in all the country in the 80s, that end with a national referendum against power plant, and that decided to close the power plant. We have not power plant in use actually in Italy. And the last two categories we followed to identify conflicts were the EJOR categories, so the 10 categories used in the JATLAS, that are nuclear power plant, waste management, water management, industrial infrastructure projects, and the geographical distribution. So we have we try to make visible conflicts in all the Italian regions, of course, where important conflicts exist. Then, arriving to the participatory map and local communities' involvement, it was important, as I told you, to the narration of the socio-environmental conflicts for the composition of the map, is based on the participation of local committees and associations actively involved in the mobilization. These harkbacks to the practice of the participatory geographic information systems that put together the knowledge of local population to the GIS system. In this way, the Atlas recognizes and seeks to enhance the work of local organizations, local committees, local associations, and valorize the know-how that they generate in the area and in all country. How we collect information with the committees, we are using a conflict form that is sent to the committees in different forms, and we ask to the committees to fill in the form, or at least to help us with interviews. And after this process, once the conflict form is drafted, we have a final revision step with each committee. So this permits us to control the quantity and also the quality of information that we put inside. The information collected is divided on 7 sections. So general information, basic data about the project, the conflict. Then we try to classify the conflict within the 10 categories of EJOLT. So nuclear, mineral ores and building extraction, waste management, water management. Then we have project details and actors, so scientific and technical information about the project and actors from the project side and the institutional side involved in the conflict and project construction. And then we go in the mobilization part, that means trying to date the mobilization, the starting point, the end of the mobilization, even if the majority of them are not finished, so are ongoing, the groups mobilizing, and the form of mobilization. Then we analyze the impacts on the environment, on health, and on socio-economic situation of the area. And finally, we go on the current outcome. So what the mobilization produced in terms of outcomes for environmental justice, on the status of the project, the current status of the project, the development of alternative proposals, and an evaluation of the conflict, if it can be considered a success or not for environmental justice. The last part that is very important for us is the reference part. So we put with the help of the committees inside each conflict form a part we link to the sources that we use, and also information of other materials, documents, video and photos that can be interesting to someone that wants to know more things and detailed information about each conflict. The status of the project and the working group, we are 5 researchers and 3 trainees working on this since October, and the 3 trainees since November. On some issues we have special collaborators or environmental justice organizations. For example, in Basilicata we have the issue I told you before that help us in the revision and help us also in the identification of local communities. Or for example, we have the CRAP, that is the Comitato Romano Repubblica, so the local, from the committee from Rome in charge of fight for public water management, that was highly involved in all the referendum process in Italy to guarantee public management of water, and that own and try to describe all the conflict on water management. We have around 12 conflicts on water management, so they are responsible for the description and for contact the specific communities. And then we have, for example, external researchers. For example, Salvatore is helping us with the cases of Campania and others in other cases. So the actual status of the database is 30 conflicts finalized and revised, so 5, okay, finished, and 40 conflicts that have to be revised and corrected, so the last step, the final revision, and 30 ongoing to be received by committees. More, these to arrive to the 100, and we have also new 40 conflicts that we identified and we would like to map, but we are still looking at how, who will map them, so assign these conflicts to the conflicts. Of course, it's an ongoing project, so we are still working we are still inside all the process, but we already met some difficulties and we try to find solutions then with the committees. This is helping the possibility to change a little bit and reprocess the tools and the way to collect information helped us in building a real instrument that then committees can use. So for us it's very important this open process to change a little bit the methodology of work with them in the communication system and also in the tools used to describe conflicts. So the first difficulty was a little bit the first phase, caused by the participatory process that, as you well know, is a process that needs a little bit more time than other kind of process. So the identification of conflicts with the committees and with specific experts. The first contact with the committees was not always been easy to manage, and so these took a little bit more time, and the initial phase also of description of the conflicts. Apart from the participatory process and related problems, in the description of all the conflicts, we identified 3 moments of difficulties. The first one is the reading and comprehension of the conflict form, then the collection of information, and the third one is the systematization of data. So, what I mean with that, the language and structure used in the form have sometimes been difficult to understand for the committees. As I told you, we are using the same conflict form used in the EJAPLAS database. So, the first contact with the committees, in the majority of cases, was by email or by telephone, sending them the conflict form and the instruction of how to fill in the conflict form. And we met problem in not all the cases, but almost all the cases. So it has been essential to make a thorough step of explanation on the structure of the conflict form through telephone or in-person contact with the committees. And for example, one example with the CRAP, that is a EJO, that is an environmental justice organization based in Rome, so it was not so difficult to communicate with them, but in some cases of water management conflicts, they had to describe conflicts about remunicipalization of water, and was not clear to them, and we had to rediscuss where to focus the conflict. If the conflict was on the privatization of the management of water or in the remunicipalization, and this changed all the structure and all the description of the form. So we had to readapt, to rediscuss with them the methodology, the structure, and to focus together how to, what kind of focus give to the conflict. Then in the collection of information was more difficult in much more difficult in territories with local mobilization. That means always low interest of citizens and also low widespread knowledge of the project. So in these cases, and there are a lot of mobilization in Italy, but not all of them are high mobilization. So in these cases, was appropriate to contact other experts or local authorities or entity to understand in depth the mobilization. But what happened, for example, after this, once completed and drafted the conflict form, we returned the information on the territory and to the committee, and these help them and help also the contact and the relation for then the use of the atlas as an instrument. And this, for example, is an example in another case in Sicily. In the Gela case, for example, it was necessary to contact other experts, and also in the petrochemical complex, Priolo Augusta, where it was absolutely not easy to find. There is not a local committee, so there are some protests and some mobilization, but not an organized committee and not a well-organized committee, so it was not easy to gather information. Or for example, and this happened also in some cases where there was trying to identify the alternative solution of conflicts. In some cases there were alternative solutions proposed by other actors of the civil society, maybe not the committee, and the committee were not aware about this alternative proposed. So in some cases, in general, was also important to involve or at least to interview other actors of the reality. And another case is, for example, the gas pipeline in Villanova Gisti in Abruzzo. We have a researcher that is helping us, and a local activist, and he had some difficulties, even if there is a mobilization not so high, he had some difficulties in gather information about the specific information about the project. Then another phase is not simple. Maybe the biggest difficulty we had with committees was in the systematization of data. That I think can be read as a difficulty, but then a big way to improve and to empower local communities. And was in adapting each conflict to the structure of the conflict form. And in particular, it was the case for the forms of mobilization, the mobilized actors, and the claims of the committees present in the atlas form that were not fitting into, or not fitting exactly into the Italian reality. And for example, some nice example can be in forms of mobilization. The atlas, of course, talk about the claim for rights of Mother Nature, and this discourse that is not an Italian and European discourse, the rights of Mother Nature, it was used by some committees. And so it was chosen and identified about some committees. Of course, it was a misunderstanding of what rights of Mother Nature means. That is not the defense of the environment. But this led to this debate with them of other kind of mobilization in other parts of the world. For example, in Latin America, there is a typical discourse. And so this helped us in the process of also understanding what we mean for environmental conflicts in general. Or another case was the classification limiting for the specific Italian situation. So it occurred with a population characteristic. We defined, or we tried to identify population involved in the conflict in urban population, semi-urban population, and rural population. And what happened, okay, the Italian situation is a small country, high density, and so was not, in some situations, was not clear to identify the population. So it was limited, the structure, to the Italian situation. The intensity of the conflict was a big issue, and it still is a big issue, and I hope we can discuss a little bit together about this, because how you define the intensity of the conflict. We had a discussion also by email with Salvatore. You don't agree with what is the intensity of the conflict? The conflict can be intense in terms of the quality of mobilization, but also in terms of the quantity of mobilization. So a big population protesting against the project can be defined in intense conflict, but also little number of population that manage to raise big awareness about a project. And also, this is the case, for example, for the outcome. There are some conflicts. For example, these years in Venice was the big scandal, gossip of the Mose project. It is a project to avoid the flooding of Venezia during high tide Maria. And they construct a big impacting project for the lagoon of Venezia, and so in Venezia there is a committee mobilizing against this big project. The mobilization and the process remained very in Venezia, so locally situated, but they managed to raise awareness and a lot of information in all the country about what was happening in that situation. Now the Mose project is in construction, so no outcomes, but quite spread knowledge of the project and of the impacts of the project in Venezia. And in this case, so this led to new reflections and discussion with between us, so between us researchers, but also with the committees, and so new confrontation of what is, how we define intensity, the meaning of intensity. And in some cases, for example, or what happened also, for example, the Acerra case, that we went to Acerra the other day, and there are some cases where the mobilization has been long for years, so years of mobilization. How you define, how you give the intensity of the mobilization if you have a long duration of the mobilization with high peak of protest and then calm situation. And so in these cases the idea, for example, was to give a general overview of the conflict and not give an idea or a snapshot, a photo of the current or of the moment situation of the conflict. Then, also in the systematization of information, maybe the last and the biggest problem is the last question of the conflict, that is the answer to the question, do you consider this an environmental success? Yes, no, uncertain, and why? And this was very difficult to us, so in the group of researchers, but also with the committees, because of course it's very easy to answer where a project has been stopped, for example in Porto Tolle, in Veneto, where Enel was trying to convert a power plant into a coal power plant. The project was stopped, and so it's clear for different reasons, but of course the mobilization was very important in this case, and so it's a clear situation of success for environmental justice. But in other cases that we well know of high mobilization, but not success on the project, not real and effective success on the project, how we define. So how can we consider and catalog mobilization that even without stopping the project, succeed in creating virtuous processes of popular consultation, or also valid alternative proposals. And these, for example, in the campaign committees, some of them managed to win their battles, but not all of them. But they are proposing, for example, one of the alternative solutions is to recycle or to collect in a better way the waste. Or there are other cases and other mobilization that manage to draw attention and raise awareness about their cause at national scale. And this is, for example, for the No Tariff movement. Also, the No Tariff movement, we talk about European scale. Or the No MUOS movement. So these are cases that manage to create positive, proactive activity in the local situation. For example, the No Tariff in the Valley, new ways of participation, new involvement, and a lot of awareness of local population. And also to raise a lot of awareness and also new tools for fighting at national level. And this issue, of course, is another, with the intensity of conflict, I think is another issue that we can discuss. It is not easy, and I think is quite subjective to identify if a case can be considered a success or not. But of course, there are processes and positive practice that are being put in place in some conflicts. Finally, some research and working outlooks that we hope. The project is an ongoing project, so we still want, and we are also thinking on what to do with all this data we are collecting. So we have the intention to process, gather data, to analyze social and economic dynamics inherent to environmental conflicts at regional, national level, and also maybe to find also international tendency in these dynamics. We would like to develop thematic maps, so to reflect about specific things and specific questions. For example, are poorest and disadvantaged areas more affected by environmental conflicts, or if environmental conflicts are more common in areas rich, for example, in fossil fuels, and which types of projects have more impacts on population, environment, health. Then what we would like, and we are thinking how, is to create environmental monitoring systems implemented by committees to have monitored situation in the conflict area. And then we would like also all these problems, solution, feedbacks we are having with committees. We would like to have, we are thinking how to have an evaluation, final evaluation of all the systematization process with committees. That can be a good occasion also to reflect and to give to them ideas on how to use this instrument, this atlas, for the battle they are carrying out. So I will give you an introduction to the project now. Then we will go through objectives and instruments we have in this project. We will talk about the methodology we used in the case selection process and then in the participatory mapping process. Then we will talk about difficulties and solutions we found during the process. And we will try to give you some outlooks about our research and work in the future. And at the end will be place for debate, and so you will have time to ask questions and we hope to have some space coordinating this project, and we are working with a group of researchers in this atlas. Regarding myself, I started working on environmental conflicts in spring 2014 at ICTA in Barcelona. I spent some months there, and then in September I arrived in Rome, and I joined the research group of CDCA, and we started in October working on this project that is still ongoing. Someone is arriving. For stimulate new works, respective works. So, the name of the atlas is the Italian Environmental Conflict Atlas, that basically is a database in the form of a georeferenced map representing initially around 100 cases of Italian socio-environmental conflicts. And these conflicts we are mapping date from the 60s to the 2014. Is an atlas in form of a participatory map, so we involved local committees from civil society in the description of each conflict. And once created this database with 100 cases, the documentation center on environmental conflicts, and I will tell you about the CDCA later. And so comes from the work that CDCA started in 2007 of study of environmental conflicts at global level, and it's improved by the experience and work of the EJOL project and specifically the atlas. So there is a big synergy in the working methodology that we arrived to this participatory map. The EJOL project, I don't think we have to explain in this situation, you know, but the main idea is it will be created an online platform that will be a living and open source instrument in the hand of the communities. The work comes from the will to study, describe and recount environmental conflicts that have been developing in Italy, with the aim of scrutinizing causes that produce them, the mobilization that characterize them, and the consequence that they have on the perception of the environmental issues and on the development of studies and policies about common goods management and territories transformation. The Italian mapping project is conceived and implemented by CDCA, that is the